I just actually filmed this whole video and apparently it didn't record. So I'm upset. I'm outside, so I couldn't even see the computer screen. But today I want to talk about automatisms. And automatisms specifically in relation to parapsychology and psychology. Now, I've done a lot of talking already, so yeah, this is upsetting. But anyways, automatisms can manifest in a variety of different ways, particularly sensory and motor automatisms. Sensory automatisms could manifest as hallucinations, apparitions, and so on. And motor automatisms involve ideomotor action, typically, like automatic writing, using a Ouija or a spirit board, table tipping, a wide variety of different things. And I want to talk about that. Now, in the past, people like Frederick Myers thought that automatisms could be developed and trained along specific pathways that would be conducive for parapsychological inquiry and research. And when I first started studying these things, I did so on a very amateurish level, and I'm still just barely getting involved in academia. But I started doing something similar to that. I used hypnosis and other methods around the end of 2010. That's when we really got started with the hypnosis anyways. I wanted to see if hypnosis could be used to establish contact with the dead. And as anyone who watches my videos knows, I'm a pretty big skeptic. I don't believe in life after death. I'm very open to the possibility, and I want to research these topics, but I'm not convinced, and it'll probably take a lot to convince me. I've been doing a project in studying physical seance phenomena and seance groups. I decided a long time ago actually to start a experimental group for the purpose of developing physical mediumship. We haven't sat in the last few weeks because of college and everything's just been swamped. But with that being said, I feel that my background in magic and mentalism and my knowledge of the spiritualistic and parapsychological literature makes me pretty fairly qualified to evaluate these things. With that being said, a more searching and important study, maybe not more important, but an equally important study that I want to do that's in the conceptual phase, would be to follow up on the early concepts that I was exploring, using hypnosis as a method of communicating with the dead, but in a different fashion. In the last year and a half or so, I've decided that, and I've done this a few times experimentally already, but I haven't really been able to gauge the evidentiality of the material because I haven't been able to study it in a controlled fashion yet for a variety of reasons. But the concept is to use hypnosis not as a means in and of itself to communicate with the dead, but as a method of developing automatisms, developing things like automatic writing and training it specifically for communication with the dead. What I would do the newest method I typically would use is I would use hypnosis, hypnotic induction, and then I might do something like fracturing, which anyone who knows anything about hypnosis knows what that is. And I would, it's basically constant, rapid induction, reinduction, taking the person in and out of hypnosis very rapidly, and it tends to deepen the trance significantly. And that can be used to develop somnambulism in suitable subjects. And when they're in that type of state, what I would typically do is suggest that they feel themselves, they focus on the breathing, and their breathing takes them deeper sleep. And just to feel themselves surrounded by a white, pure, warm light. And as they breathe in, that light just fills their body, just goes down their body, down their body, and so on and so on. And just fills their body with that light and then spreads infinitely outwards. And they just, as they breathe it in, they become absorbed into that light. They feel the pressure and the weight of that light as it fills them, and then they just feel themselves becoming engulfed in it, and that light absorbs them, and they feel themselves getting lighter and lighter and lighter, just floating into that light, dissolving into it. And when they're in a sufficiently deep state, I would typically suggest that now into that light, I want you to send out one thought and nothing more. I don't want you to focus on any images or anything you see, but focus on your physical sensations, physical feelings, experiences, any sounds you might hear. But to focus on the physical process. If they focus on images and whatnot, they tend to get too involved in what's definitely imagination. So I would say that, and then I would say, now in a moment, you're going to send out a thought to your spirit guide or your control. I don't really believe in spirit guides again, but I think it's interesting to look at from psychological aspect of studying mediumship. But it is a reliable method, so I would tell them to, or it does seem to be reliable as far as the experience goes, at least. So they would send out that thought to their guide, and then I'd say when you feel your guide's presence, when you feel some difference in physical sensation, when your guide overshadows you and steps in, your right hand is going to tip up in the air automatically. It's just going to get lighter and lighter, or you'd say something like that, something to let you know that they're feeling that experience. And as that happens, typically you would say, good, just focus on your breathing. Just let your breathing take you down. Don't focus on that thought at all. Just send out that one thought and let it go. And just focus on your breathing. Telling them that makes them focus on the breathing and let that thought go. And typically the responses are fairly consistent. Their hand will go up typically if they're experiencing something. And I tell them I'm going to put a pen in their hand and there's a notebook down beside them. Now, if your guide is here, your control, I want you to just focus on your breathing and don't think of anything else. Your hand is just becoming numb, and you just make suggestions like that. And then after you feel they've gotten into a sufficiently deep state, you're going to say that if their guide is there, I want you to start trying to write with their hand. Let me know you're here. Write with their hand. Take control of it. And they'll start writing with the hand typically. And over time, this could be developed into a reliable method of testing mediumship, actually. And you could develop your own subjects for the purpose of that. And I've been thinking about an experimental protocol that I could use for that. Now, it's a fascinating idea. And that's the basic concept. So, if I were trying to do a study on automatisms, hypnotically developed automatisms, which would be a study to test the reliability of the method, and this method could potentially induce regular macro psi effects, and reliable ones. And it could be very, very important, I think. I've seen that quite a few interesting things happen when people are in those states of consciousness. Now, I haven't been able to actually do this study yet, so I'm not convinced that they're actually psychically getting the information, but it is interesting. One girl actually got some, she started getting information about deceased people, allegedly deceased people, and when she started these methods the first few times, and typically you would regard those as drop-in communicators in parapsychology. The first time it happened, a lot of the stuff was very muddled. There was some information that seemed to check out, but it just seemed muddled by our imagination. I asked the control the next seance, or sitting, that we could. I told her or him or whatever that it was a him actually. No, actually I think it was a her. I think it was her grandmother or something supposedly. But I said that we couldn't find the information that she told us about, and basically couldn't find the information. And sorry, I've got people talking to me and trying to get my attention. But I told her that, and then this seance, some new information started coming through from Jonathan Donald Lucas, I think that was the name, and all the information checked out on that one pretty much. I think the name was a little off, the middle name, but everything checked out. It was very interesting. The year, the place it happened. So there's two options. She either researched it, well, actually probably three options. She either researched it, somehow subconsciously picked up the information in the past, and then pushed it out as coming from a spirit, or three, that it was spirit communication or psi. And I wasn't able to really control that, so I don't know, but it was very interesting, and it at least suggests that maybe the method can be used to reliably produce the experience of contact with the deceased. Now, I really want to test if it can be used to really produce evidential material in support of macro psi effects as a mediumistic study method, particularly. But what I would be looking for in the automatism study would be similarities and consistencies preceding and occurring after the onset of the automatism. One can study multiple mediums and automatists to compare and contrast the process. So, for example, if the medium always twitched their neck before they started writing or going through a trance, that would be something to document. Maybe they have some experiential aspects. Like I know Miss Lenora Piper would always say that after she came out of her trances, she felt like she was coming back to a lower level. She felt like she was out of her body on some occasions. I know Gladys Leonard said that at some points. But there could be an interesting experiential aspect to it, worthy of documentation. The next thing is to check the accuracy of biographical information purporting to come from the controls. That could verify the control's identity. But that would be very easy to research and hard to control for. So that wouldn't be evidential. It would just be something that would need to be included, I think. It would just add to it, I think. Another thing would be to see which personality types might make the best subjects for experimentally developing automatisms. I said I predicted some degree of dissociation and maybe even creativity regarding those people. The next thing would be to blindly score the allegedly evidential material coming from the spirits. Proxy sitters could be utilized to rule out cold reading and different ways of getting feedback from sitters, and basically rule out most normal hypotheses. And the protocol itself would probably, if strictly followed, would rule out. I haven't gotten to the protocol yet, but I'll get to that in a minute. These are just things to look for in the study. Another thing would be to see if automatic writing can reliably lead to trance mediumship, and if so, check to see the time average in its development. That would be a side project, maybe even a separate study. But that's something I've been working on with someone, actually, already, not as a part of any study, though. A very important thing to do would be to record the brainwave activity and the mental state of the medium when the communications come through. Perhaps material can be compared and contrasted to check for evidentiality respective of the level of brainwave activity in the automatists. For example, beta, alpha, theta, and so on. Items could be scored individually and globally in each sample. Basically, if a person's in a certain state of consciousness, maybe by actually constantly measuring the state of consciousness a person's in as the material comes through, maybe you can say that in a certain state of consciousness the material is more evidential, so you can check for correlations there. Another bulletin would be to record and average the time required for the automatism to start developing via hypnotic inductions across the entire sample. That would be important for people who wanted to replicate it. And this whole thing is about replication and making some sort of reliable method of studying mediumship or claim mediumship. Another thing would be to examine the suggestibility of the controls, spirits in question. Could they be influenced to change their stories, and to what extent? If their story changes, there are two real options that I can think of. Either they're subconscious creations of the medium, and therefore, obviously, you can suggest them away to some extent. The other option is that maybe when the dead get put into the state, if you believe in communication with the dead, it's possible, it's conceivable that the dead might be put into a type of hypnotic trance when they're using the medium's body. the same type of state that the medium would be in, hypothetically. I think Richard Hodgson originally suggested that. I said examine the subject's belief systems to see if that influences the communications. That would be something to add to it. This isn't only a test on mediumship. This is a test on the method itself that I'm conceiving. Check the surety of the communicator regarding the material that comes through. This surety can be weighed in regard to the evidentiality of the information conveyed from the automatist. That would mean that in the same way that brain states might correlate with the evidentiality of the method or the messages, maybe the conviction that the person has that the information is reliable and accurate could actually correlate with the accuracy of the material conveyed. Now here's the actual protocol I've been thinking of, and this is to try and rule out experimenter and subject fraud by using a three-part experimental protocol. Now this is a pretty complex procedure, but you'll understand why I've went to such lengths with it if you listen to it. Now there would be 3 experimenters in this. Experimenter 1 would gather the mediums and maybe develop them, but he wouldn't know the identity of experimenter 2. In that way, no knowledge of the mediums could be leaked to the experimenter, the second experimenter, even accidentally. Experimenter 2 gathers the sitters but does not know experimenter 1's identity. That way he can't know the mediums that the person gathered or the experimenter, so there's no way of leaking information back and forth. So what I said is they can't learn who the mediums are and can't leak who the sitters are, thereby keeping the mediums and automatists and sitters blind to each other's identity. Now experimenter 3 would be the organizer. It's pretty much the thing that brings it all together. The organizer who knows the identity of the experimenters but is not granted the identity of the mediums or sitters. Experimenter 2 would call experimenter 3 and give the name of a randomly selected, this is just an example. For example, experimenter 2 would call experimenter 3, give the name of a randomly selected sitter from his or her sample. Then experimenter 3 would call experimenter 1 and give the first name or some other thing to establish a link with the hypothetical deceased personality to him or her. Experimenter 1 would then give the link, which would be designed not to convey much sensory information, like a name, like I said, to the automatist, who would establish the communication. The process would be reversed for the scoring part of the study. The medium's information, whatever's written out through automatic writing or trance mediumship or whatever, would be given to the first experimenter, who would give it to experimenter 3, who would make sure to remove any references to the name that was given to the experimenter when he gave the thing to the any references to the name that was given to the experimenter to give to the medium would be removed from the script, and the information would be presented to experimenter 2, who would then give it to the sitter for scoring. And that's not the whole process. That's the whole process of how the scripts are given to the person, but there's also a part about blinding it. But I'll get to that in a moment. All 3 experimenters will be given the scored or blindly scored material so that no one can tamper with the data without one of the 3 knowing. After the study is done, experimenter 3 would statistically score the material for the study, checking for overall accuracy and significance with the analysis sent to all the other experimenters, who can then double-check the analysis for error. If everyone has, like, part of the information at least, then there is very little chance that experimenter 3 or any of the experimenters could fake it, because everyone would know the data, so everyone would probably have to be on it, or everyone would have to be in on it to really say that experimenter fraud was the cause of the results. Here's the blinding aspect. Blinding would be accomplished by submitting 2 readings, one being the one intended for the sitter, the other being randomly selected from the sample of readings. If the first name is given to the automatist right before the reading, readings will be grouped into pairs of persons who had similar characteristics, i.e. old women, old men, young women, boy child, girl child, etc. Then queuing information that would have come from the first name supplied by the sitter would be removed to ensure blind evaluations of the material. That's the basic outline of the experiment. It seems to be pretty solid in my mind. I think that the protocol itself is very good. I think it really does limit greatly the idea that experimenter fraud can account for the data if it proves positive. So I think the protocol's fine. This project hasn't started yet. I'm still working on my physical seance project, and that's even on hiatus now because of college. But this is conceived of. This is something I really want to do, and it's something I'm planning on working on during my undergrad and maybe even graduate years. If anyone's interested in participating in the study or helping me plan it out, feel free to suggest things. If you want to volunteer, if you're around North Carolina and you want to maybe volunteer for as a medium, then or to develop using the protocol, then by all means go for it. I'd be up for that. At least planning it out. Now I haven't actually picked out anyone else to participate in the study, but it is planned out. If anyone has any suggestions on how to make the experiment more sound, if you see any flaws in it potentially, then feel free to suggest them. This is something that I want to make an ongoing project, and it's not just to test mediumship. That's part of it. The main test is, or the main point is testing the method, because I feel that parapsychology needs a reliable way of testing mediums and maybe developing mediums. I think that it's a novel approach, and the benefits are that the person not only could possibly provide evidence for some sort of psi functioning, but they could also explore and experience the different levels of their unconsciousness that they didn't know about before, and maybe even show us more about the phenomena and the experiential aspect of these things. I think it could be a very interesting and influential and important contribution. I'm going to need help planning it out. I'm going to need, when I actually get to doing this, which is something I've been thinking about for a while, I could use help. So if you guys want to do that, comment or actually message me, contact me, alex@northcarolina.usa.com. That's alex@northcarolina.usa.com. You can get up with me on Facebook if you want to. Comment, like, and subscribe, etc. Hope you enjoyed the video.